Thanks for joining us, everybody. In the next hour or so, we hope to leave you with a little better understanding of the film business and provide some answers and insights that every filmmaker ought to consider when shooting on the shoestring budget. By way of introduction, my name is Jim Breckenridge. I am founder and director of the Play Crafters Group, and for over 20 years I've been working with writers from all across the country, helping them to develop and fine-tune both play scripts and screenplays, and bringing them actually several steps closer to being sold and produced. And our service has been recognized as being in the top 10 of script analysts in the country. To help us address today's topic and tie up those shoestrings, let's welcome our panelists, Stefan Avalos, Phillip Carroll, and here on my right is Tom Verdi. So Tom, let me begin with you.
Thanks, Jim.
Since you're closer. Tom is a professional who wears many, many hats, and not knowing exactly where to start today, I thought I'd toss the ball to him and have him introduce you to you all and tell you a little about his background and professional experience.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me, Jim, and the Bucks Fever Film Fest committee. Thanks to everyone who helped put this event together. I am Thomas Verdi. I'm a writer, director, producer. I have a few different companies I work with. One is called the Film Fund. We're a film funding company. We fund independent filmmakers for their short films. You write one sentence pitching your short film idea for a chance to receive up to $10,000 to produce it. So you can check that out at thefilmfund.co. I started that company when I was looking for film funding for my own project, Son of Blackbeard, that won Best of Fest here, I guess 4 years ago. I forget what year it was exactly. Yeah, I do the Film Fund. We also have an ad agency called FF Branded, where we do corporate video production using those filmmakers that we've gotten to know through the Film Fund. And I have my own production company also called TAV Films that I produce my passion project through. So Son of Blackbeard and various feature scripts that I'm working on. So yeah, an independent producer, writer, director, and sometimes editor. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Now let's welcome this afternoon's Zoom crew. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Our friends here are out in California in the Golden State, and I believe both of them actually joined Tom in having roots from the Philadelphia area. So we welcome them today to help share their insights and experience with us into the wacky, wild, and often financially challenging world of filmmaking. So first off, let's welcome writer, director, producer Stefan Avalos. Welcome, Stefan. Won't you please tell us?
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Please tell us a little about you and your background, if you would.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Bucks County. That's where I was born and raised, and spent quite a bit of my life. Moved to Los Angeles about 20 years ago. I made my first couple movies in Bucks County. The first was sort of a standard feature film, shot on film, you know, pounding the pavement for money for a couple of years, and that had a final budget of about $180,000. And then the second one, because I got thoroughly kind of ripped off by distributors, no money. So a friend of mine and I, a fellow by the name of Lance Weiler, and we partnered up and we made a movie for no money called The Last Broadcast. And that one, unlike the first one, did actually in the end do quite well. And it also redefined kind of the idea of low budget filmmaking. Since then, I made a movie out here for Warner Brothers, Ghost of Edendale, which also was a very low budget movie, but did pretty well. And then most recently, I did a movie called Strad Style, which is actually a documentary, again self-financed, low budget. I don't know that it would be the low budget that you guys are looking for, but it was low budget and you know did well. So yeah, I've had way too much experience with low budget filmmaking. That's it.
Well, and that's why you're here.
And that's why I'm here.
By the way, you guys are missing just a terrific, beautiful autumn afternoon in Bucks County. It's just a gorgeous day.
Oh, wow. It's actually raining here in LA today, which for us is tremendously rare. So we're outside like, you know.
Well, you probably need it.
Oh, look at that. That's great.
Let's pass the baton to Phillip Carroll, who's no stranger to these proceedings. Phil's been working out in California right now and has been a long-time supporter of the Bucks Fever Film Fest and has also worn a number of hats in the film business. So, Phil, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see all of you guys, too. Thanks so much for having me back. I've been a filmmaker, I guess, alumni of the Bucks Fever Film Fest since 2009, I believe. Bucks Fever Film Fest was my first opportunity to have a film play on the big screen in a movie theater, and ever since then, I kind of had the bug and was trying to figure out how to get a film back in a movie theater. And a couple years ago, I had that opportunity where I made my first indie feature film called The Honeymoon Phase, and it was distributed by a company called Dark Sky Films, and we're well on our way to earning our money back. It'll probably be another couple years. It was a $200,000 feature, but we planned it as a $20,000 feature originally. We were lucky enough to come into the financing to do the slightly larger budget version, but I have a lot of experience with the shoestring budgets, so I'm very excited to discuss that today. And the film's available for free on Amazon Prime, Vudu, and Tubi, if anybody's interested. Definitely a rated R sci-fi thriller, though. I'm not sure the ages today. I can't see the other side of the camera. But just a heads up for anybody that is interested in seeing the movie.
Well, we're all very young and virile right here. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Anyone know what that's from? Sound of Music. Correct. Correct. So we all have to start somewhere. So how did you guys get started? Were you young Spielbergs running around the backyard with a movie camera or perhaps a smartphone? How did it happen for you?
Sure, I can go. The first thing I remember is it was, I guess, a VHS camcorder. Me and my sister, we made like a toothpaste commercial for Crest, like a spec. And that was like the first thing I made. And then I didn't really touch a camera for a while. But I was always making little stop motion shorts, just like growing up with a parents' house, and then wrote a script senior year of high school with a couple of friends, and we just made that with no budget, just a camera that we had, DSLR. My dad was holding the boom pole, which was a painter's pole we got from Home Depot, and just kind of like jerry rigged up with a microphone. So definitely started with zero budget, no experience, just kind of started making movies with my friends.
Great. Phil, Stefan?
Bill, you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, sure. A very similar experience. VHS camera. Actually, I think the one right before that, it was not DV. There was another one that was a little bit bigger. And then it was VHS, and it was my dad's camera. And I remember I got the idea to try making a movie because I had gotten the special edition of Jurassic Park on VHS that Christmas. And there was a second tape that showed the behind the scenes of how they made the movie. And it was my first time, I guess, comprehending that there was this whole entire world. And it was just really amazing to see that. And I got really excited and wanted to see if I could do it with my Legos. So kind of like Tom, I did some stop motion animation stuff using my Lego dinosaurs to rip off Jurassic Park. I feel like my generation of filmmakers, Jurassic Park was probably like the biggest influence for us.
That's great.
Common one, but that's how I got my start.
Stefan?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, you're going to see this recurring theme, and I think that Steven Spielberg runs through all of it. I think all these movies in their backyard. For me, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, so that gives you the age sort of differences. The summer of '81 or whatever, we got a video camera, which at that time was the big hulking side pack connected to a camera, that sort of deal. And we were out in the woods trying to make our big action movie with only 3 people. So in order to have big shootouts, we came up with the novel idea of making a movie about clones. And that way I could had my brother play 20 different characters as they were running around. Followed up very quickly by a werewolf movie based on the American Werewolf in London influence of that summer and that time. So, yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of us, it's not so much, oh, I'm going to get a job. It's almost like I liken it more to the calling of, calling to the church. It's like you have this calling when you're a kid, and it never stops. And I mean, from the time I was 10 years old, I wanted to make movies, and that has never diminished.
That's always great to hear, and we're welcome you to the party.
And we're both in Los Angeles, and it hasn't diminished. So that says something.
Yeah, good to hear
Definitely
that.
financially, it could be tough.
Indeed, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little later on. But first, I want to take a half a step back. A seminal question I believe that every filmmaker needs to reconcile for themselves at one time or another. And that question is, as a filmmaker, are you just exploring the art of film? Are you just making home movies, which is perfectly all right? It's a lot of fun. I've done it myself, and I've had the most fun doing it. Or are you actually trying to share your vision with others? More importantly, paying others, a paying audience. But let's assume we're trying to reach an audience, we're trying to make money, and we're going to all do it on a shoestring budget. So you might want to ask yourself, how long are my shoestrings? What exactly are the resources available to me? And I'm going to slip over to Tom again right now and maybe have him talk a little more about the Film Fund to you, because it sounds like a terrific idea that he's actually put in service of others. Tom?
Thanks. Yeah, always happy to plug the Film Fund wherever I can. So the Film Fund started actually as a college project when I was at Lehigh, and I was looking for funding for my own short, like I said earlier. And for short films, they're particularly tough to get funding for, just because they don't usually make money. No one's paying. No one's going to the theater to watch a short film. There aren't really. There are some short distributors, and there are new companies now coming out streaming, but generally the money's in feature films, but shorts are important for filmmakers to start out with. As we all know here, we're all making shorts. They serve as our calling card, our resume, maybe proof of concept for a feature. But, aside from screenwriting contests, grants, and crowdfunding on things like Kickstarter, Seed and Spark, there's one other, I'm blanking on the name of it right now. It's tough to get funding for shorts. So I ran into that issue, and I wanted to create something that was a lot simpler and a lot less time consuming than a grant application, because grant applications can be like 20 pages, and is it even getting read by the committee? And it's just so competitive. So the Film Fund is a lot simpler than that. It is a contest, but you write one sentence pitching your film for a chance to receive up to 10 grand to make it. For short films, we're working on details for feature films soon. But yeah, there's a small entry fee. It's $30 to enter, and the funding comes from those entry fees. And we have 4 contest periods per year, so we're always funding shorts about 4 times per year. So you can check that out at thefilmfund.co. We also have a lot of great free resources on the website as well. We have an ebook called The Ultimate Guide to Pre-Production if you don't know how to schedule or budget or write a script or anything like that. So lots of resources available out there, and it really came from a need that I had selfishly to create something to help fund films.
Well, that sounds great, and thank you for that. So it sounds like if you're starting out, your film is most likely going to be self-funded, self-financed, or maybe if you're lucky, a couple of rich uncles or family members, or maybe some people like Tom here. But in any case, we're probably talking about no-budget, low-budget films. And if so, these films are still more likely than not to be self-funded, possibly even written by the filmmaker themselves. So in starting out, guys, I'm wondering if that was true in your case. Did you all begin as writer-directors?
I did, yeah. I want to be a writer. I'm a writer, director, producer, so I'm also a control freak. That's part of it. But.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, I got started as a writer-director, and I think I'm reaching a point in my career where I want to focus more on just the directing aspect, and collaborate with somebody who is a writer, because I think for me, I used to write out of necessity, kind of like you were saying, Jim. Like we all have to kind of start by coming up with our own stories, and not out of like the passion. Like I really love writing. So that's kind of a new thing for me, I guess, is I'm looking to kind of try out what it's like collaborating with a writer as opposed to being a one-man team.
Right, right. Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think there's a similarity here. I consider myself an accidental writer. I never thought of myself as a screenwriter first, but that said, I've written all the screenplays that I've directed. I've produced a few other projects, so I've been on just as a producer. But for the stuff that I've directed, I've been the writer also, including the project that's in development right now, which is actually a much bigger project. I'm I'm still a writer, so I think that I don't think there's any. It's writing is definitely the hardest part of the whole process. I mean, it's I kind of feel that when a movie's made, you know, when you see the above the line credits before the movie starts, the director is always the last guy before the movie starts. I really feel it should be the writer. Without the writer, there is no movie. But if that's not your passion, yeah, connect with somebody who does love to write, because there's a lot of great screenwriters out there.
I'm also curious if you were able to attract any backers, either in your first or second or third outings. How did you manage to do that?
Like big name, talented actors, or just how do we generally attack cast in general to the projects?
Well, how did you find your backers?
Oh, backers. I
Yeah.
thought you said actors. I'm sorry.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, I partnered up with a producer, a friend of mine, and we both put in some money, family and friends, really, for my latest project.
Did any of you ever go through a crowdfunding route or create a website, or was that not even in the cards for you when you were starting out?
Yeah, the internet didn't exist when I started out. So, yeah, I know family and friends. That's, yeah, yeah.
We were gonna do Kickstarter for honeymoon phase, and we kind of the backstory there is we were in a competition that Project Greenlight and Shudder TV were running at the time, called the Real Fear Horror Contest, and you had to do a 3-minute pitch video for a horror film that could be shot for under $300,000. And we ended up winning the audience vote on Facebook for our pitch, and then went to the top 5 and went to a fellowship called Shutter Labs, where Mike Flanagan, a huge horror filmmaker now, he mentored us along with some other great horror filmmakers, and kind of got our script ready to shoot. We didn't end up winning the competition, but from the materials that we had shot, our plan was we were going to use that pitch video as our Kickstarter video. So we got alternate takes where instead of saying vote for us on Facebook, we said, please donate to us on Kickstarter. But ultimately, kind of our success in the competition became a proof that we were onto something with our concept, and attracted the financier of the film that we ultimately got on board. And that, Jim, you kind of made the joke about the rich uncle. That's kind of what ended up happening was growing up, I knew of a cousin of my dad who was a successful entrepreneur. And I knew of him because every Christmas he would send meat packages to us because he was an entrepreneur who owned a contract cleaning company for meat processing plants. So he was the meats guy, the furthest thing from film, meat and potatoes. And when I got out of college, I asked my dad if he could set up a meeting for me with him so that I could pick his brain on business, since filmmaking is really just entrepreneurship. Every film that you make, you're kind of starting a company. And I was feeling lost after school, and I started meeting with him for mentorship. And he took a liking to me and was so impressed by how well we and all the materials we had put together that he said, if you guys end up losing, I'll finance the movie for you. So it was kind of the combination where our preparation for doing crowdfunding and, a film competition ended up helping us prove ourselves to a private financier. who in our case happened to be family. And from talking to a lot of independent filmmakers, it sounds like for your first couple films, if you're doing low budget, a lot of times it is kind of a wealthy family member somewhere in the family tree that is passionate about the arts or wants to help out and, you know, believes in you as a young artist. So that was my experience.
At this point in your career, are you doing the crowdfunding route? I get a no from Phil.
No. I'm doing my best to avoid it. I'm just not good at begging, I guess. I feel really bad for money for people, so it's much easier to try and pitch myself to one person rather than kind of going out to all my friends and family. But you also have to be bold, as a filmmaker. So it's just, it's a skill that you develop. But I had a much easier time kind of going to businesses and asking them for hey, can you donate coffee and bagels, or stuff like that. So that was kind of my approach when I was doing shorts too, was more going to the local pizza place and asking for some pizzas as opposed to kind of, hitting up friends and family.
Yeah, good idea. Stefan?
Yeah, I've not done crowdfunding, and for the level of movies that I'm working at, it's probably not a very realistic way of raising the amount needed. Now that said, I think for smaller budget movies, it is a very good way to go, or potentially a good way to go. There's also other things now happening online. With the internet, there are actually ways of structuring investment deals. And creating legitimate LLCs with legitimate venture capital going into them. That's all absolutely SEC legal. Talk about bigger budgets and you're raising money. So there is that happening online, which is amazing, because this was stuff that really you'd have to but the internet makes everything a lot easier. So that's definitely a way. But that's also probably a budget range that's a lot higher than I think, what you guys are defining as shoestring budget. So friends and family is the way to go. And quite honestly, it sounds like, friends and family, and in Hollywood, people are just using fancier names and words, but it's still friends and family, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I've yet to do crowdfunding. We are, through the Film Fund, we're getting into feature film.
The Conqueror is just trying to sort of...
We're doing feature film producing through the Film Fund, trying to raise $200,000 for a horror feature film, and we're going to be using a platform called WeFunder, which is an equity crowdfunding platform, where instead of just doing T-shirts or meet the cast and crew, you're actually getting an equity stake in the film that's produced. So that's something that's becoming a lot more popular. A lot of these platforms are regulated by FINRA, which I forget what it stands for. It's the financial whatever. They're headquartered in Philly, at least the one here. So yeah, that's something I'm looking at, is a type of crowdfunding where equity is involved, and we're looking at getting 200 backers for that project. But I've yet to do that yet.
Wow. All right, to further whet our appetites, I thought I'd review with you a few low-budget successes. And a good place to start is in our own backyard. In 1976, I wonder what that could be. Rocky was made for $1 million. And it grossed over $1.7 billion. That was the first Rocky and inspired a franchise. Now, granted, that would be about $5 million today, okay? 3 years later, Mad Max. That was made for $300,000 and grossed over $100 million. But even that would be worth about $1.25 million today. Let's go to 1991, Slacker, Richard Linklater, made for $23,000, made over $2.5 million. That would be about $50,000 today. El Mariachi in 1992 made for $7,000, grossed over $2 million. And everybody talks about Clerks, and that was made for $28,000 back in '93, and that grossed over $4 million. I could go spend the next half hour doing this, but since it is Halloween time, I thought I'd look at a couple of Halloween films. 1968, Night of the Living Dead. Made for $114,000, grossed over $18 million worldwide, but still, you'd have to put up about $250,000 to get that film made today. Halloween, you must have seen that in some iteration. In '78, it was made for $300,000, grossed over $255 million. Still cost over $1.25 million to make today. Paranormal Activity, 2009, $15,000, made over $194 million. So what I'm trying to get at here is that I hope you can see that great stories can trump any disadvantage that a low budget or no budget film might suggest to you. And let me offer up one other film in the Hollywood spirit. 1998, The Last Broadcast. That premiered in our very own county theater. The Gremlins tell me it only cost $900. Well, that's all I could find, but $900, and apparently grossed $4 million worldwide. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about that from Mr. Avcast or maybe Tom Brunt. Now let me take a cautionary step back and consider what a doctor once asked. First principles, Clarice. Simplicity. Before you've given your script a green light and hopefully had some more thought and time and deliberation and asked yourself once again the all-important question, what is my story really about? Because what I'm talking about is knowing your story inside out, beyond the flesh, beyond the blood. I'm talking the bone and marrow of your story. What's the story about at its core? What's the takeaway? What is it you want the audience to feel, think, or say after having seen the film? Because it's very easy not to have a target and miss it. And it's also very much better and far, far less painful, as I'm sure the gentleman here can affirm, if you decide up front and not in mid-shoot or mid-edit what your story was really about. That might seem obvious to you. I am telling you it happens time and time and time again. So that question leads me to throw back to the panel. Who is this film for? Now, hopefully you've discovered that before you started shooting. So I'm guessing that the genre of your film must be a very, very important consideration in regards to both your budget and your target audience. So, genre considerations. What are some of the most dollar-stretching genres a budget filmmaker might want to consider in starting out?
I mean, I would always say horror. I was talking with a former development executive at Sony, Steve Douglas Craig, the other day. We might be partnering for the feature funding I'm talking about, but he used to work with Sony, and he would always say, he went to AFI, American Film Institute, for their MFA program in screenwriting. And he was saying, you need to know what genre, you need to know what your audience is. You can't have horror comedy is a genre, but you can't have a horror comedy, drama, romantic comedy. That's not a thing. So you do need to hone in on one thing at the end of the day, because not only is that what your audience is going to be expecting, that's what distributors are going to be expecting too. Through that conversation, I learned, okay, we're doing horror. What distributors should I approach? Okay, well, there's Shudder, which someone else on the panel mentioned. There are different distribution options for different genres and their different niches. So you definitely want to do your research up front. But yeah, you'll see a lot of people starting with horror. Sam Raimi, who directed the Spider-Man, franchise originally with Sony, he did Evil Dead, kind of his claim to fame. A lot of filmmakers start with horror and then branch out from there. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm a big horror fan, and that's kind of what I'm gravitating toward. But I also like black comedy as well, but like dark humor. So
is that what you guys have arrived at in your filmmaking journeys?
Yeah, horror definitely is the genre. If you're doing a low budget movie, horror is most definitely the easiest genre to have success with, and to Tom's point, not only have some of these filmmakers started with horror. I would say that almost every famous filmmaker that you can think of started with a horror movie. Spielberg, Scorsese, De Palma, you name them, Coppola, they all started with horror movies. So it's definitely a genre that works, and it can be done for a low budget. I think one of the mistakes, and I made this mistake, and I hopefully won't make it again, but it happens. I think a lot of filmmakers try to imitate a Hollywood movie on no budget, and that's a very dangerous thing to do because nobody does Hollywood like Hollywood. So, with the exception of the occasional El Mariachi, which I don't think would succeed today, making an action movie is a fool's errand if you have no money, because you're just not going to be able to do what a Tom Cruise level movie can do with action, and that's what the audience expects. Horror, you can do a lot of stuff. You don't need to have name actors. You don't need to have locations that are just beyond expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good way to go. I think one of the things, though, is that the beauty of movie making now, unlike when I was younger, is that we have great cameras and editing equipment for nothing. They're free. And so I also like to see filmmakers, movies that cost nothing, to take chances and to make the movie they want to make, because rather than getting pigeonholed into one genre, why not experiment? I kind of feel that we're in a place right now where experimentation is not happening as much as it used to in the feature world. It's happening in other ways, shorts, 15-second TikTok videos, but features have really suffered because of just how much they cost and how many are getting made, to be honest.
That goes back to budget, and I wanted to mention that too from the examples of the films I read. If you notice, over the years, they've become cheaper to make. And the equipment's gotten much better, the sound, audio, visual, and much more portable than it's ever been. Phil, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think that what you said there, Jim, is really interesting, where over the years they became cheaper to make. But I also think on the flip side of that, audiences expect more in terms of quality. So like what Stefan was saying, like, I don't know if El Mariachi would actually survive today in today's marketplace because, yeah, it was like, it's a good film, but you can tell it's low budget, where I think like kids today watching low budget films, like there's not the same amount of, I guess, respect for the craft when it's low budget. Like I know that was you were shopping our film around, like people were like, wow, this looks like $1 million film. And we did it for $200,000, but I don't know if we could have got that same look with the same story for like 20 grand, which was our original plan. And I think that's what's really cool about shorts and like TikTok, but I mean, kind of on this conversation, one of my recent gigs in LA, an ad agency hit me up to do some TikTok ads, and they basically wanted me to throw out everything I had learned in film school video, because when you're scrolling on TikTok, if it looks produced, the kids are just going to scroll by it because it looks like an ad. So I think that depending on where your budget is, that should kind of be thought of in parallel with like the genre of the story you want to tell, and then what the platform is. Because if you only have $500, you might not want to do an action feature, but if you still want to do an action film, maybe you do a 2-minute action short because you can stretch that budget further. Or, if you have no money, kind of tell it that way because you don't necessarily need the same production value for TikTok. So I think it depends on kind of where your audience lives, backwards from there to determine, the scope of the project to fit that audience and where they're currently consuming their content.
Let me go back to something Stefan brought up, locations. The importance of choosing scripts with locations you can actually shoot at, interior versus exterior. Obviously, teenagers in a haunted house makes a pretty good location. You control the weather pretty much that way. Are there other considerations in thinking about location?
Yeah, don't shoot in LA. Shoot in Bucks County, because because you're not going to get as many people saying like, get away from me, I hate you. You're good because you're making a movie. Definitely, and I'm not even kidding. Definitely shoot where the locals are going to be more sympathetic and more sort of enamored with the novelty of filmmaking, because in Los Angeles, if you have more than 3 people on the crew, you need a permit, and then it just goes nuts from there. So yeah, if you're in Bucks County, make a movie in Bucks County. Like I could never have made the first movie I made, which was shot entirely in Bucks County, which was a feature film, a suspense thriller, sort of crime movie. We were running around, with guns, and we crashed cars, and we took over bars in New Hope and this and that. Could never have done that in Los Angeles. There's just no way. So definitely relish the fact that you guys are in Bucks County.
Oh, that's a great commercial for Bucks County. That's
Yeah.
terrific to hear. We may reuse that.
Yeah.
We also talked about, and we kind of skipped back and forward, talking about where did you find your cast? Where did you find your crew? And in some cases, I know you might have been both. And maybe how you do that now, if it differs now quite a bit.
We used what do you call it? Actor breakdown. Breakdown Express, I believe it's called, where you can post like a casting call for actors online. You get a bunch of headshots and submissions, and you can have them do self-tapes, and it's a great service. There's that. There's Backstage. My wife's Chloe, she's an actress. I'm trying to think of all the services she uses. I would start with Backstage, and have any other services?
No, that's it for me. It's Backstage. I've been using Backstage since the late '80s when it was a newspaper. They put an ad in for $25, and then like almost immediately SAG would send you a threat letter, even if you said it was a non-union, and something's never changed. Now it's all online, and you get links, which is beats the pants out of the old days of having to do things. So, but yeah, those are the 2 services. And then for crew, it's usually, at this point, I think we probably all know people and they know people. So you can create your crew from people you know. But if you don't, you can go to Mandy, and there's a bunch of different services for crew calls, also out there.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Facebook's great for crews as well. I
Facebook.
don't know the age of our audience. Some of you guys are probably not on Facebook anymore. But if you're looking for crews, it's a great meet people. You just join groups on there. When I first moved to LA, I joined a bunch of the LA filmmaker groups, and there are some people that are a little bitter on there, but there's a lot of great people as well to network with.
Yeah, for casting, I always use Backstage. Also, if you're shooting locally, the Philly Film Commission, the Greater Philadelphia Film Office, they have a great forum. You can post gigs on. I get crew from there. When I was first doing my first project, I would get crew from there. That and Production Hub is good for crew as well. But yeah, Backstage, and just my own network at this point of actors and crew that I like to work with.
In prepping for this panel,
we also use Craigslist. I don't know if that's still really a thing or not, but
Critics.
met lots of people on Craigslist.
I don't use Craigslist now. I almost bought a bicycle on Craigslist over the summer, but not film related.
That's fascinating, Captain. In prepping for this panel, I realized that a film's budget can encompass so many aspects of filmmaking that it may seem overwhelming at times, even crippling, to the point that it may dominate all of your thinking and planning at the expense of your creativity. So I think we should acknowledge that planning and preparation also becomes as important, if not more important, than the budget you're handed. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now yet, it will come. The readiness is all. Anyone?
Was there a question in there, Jim?
That's truth. Yeah.
You know who wrote that? Bill Shakespeare.
Yeah. He was all right.
Yeah, he knew his stuff. If Bill was
He
actually
probably wouldn't
Bill.
survive today's marketplace either.
Oh no.
He's got too many acts in his plays. But make your mistakes on paper. But to your point of writing being so important, making your mistakes on paper that's the cheapest place to make them, because if you don't make, if you let it go on and on, boy, it gets painful and expensive in production.
I have been, there's so much to cover here, and I've had to kind of glance at the clock, and I'm trying to keep us to about an hour. What are a couple important things right up front that a filmmaker on a budget ought to plan for or consider on a project that's going to literally suck up the next couple months of their lives?
Food.
Food.
Yeah, I mean, food, obviously. But, one mistake I made with doing my very first short film, I had no cinematography background. I just picked up a camera and just kind of directed and cam-opped and DP'd the whole thing. And I didn't have any lights. And it looked terrible. And, it was the worst film I've ever done. So I learned, okay, I'm going to hire a cinematographer next time, or at least I'm going to buy a lighting package and get some lighting and, take some lighting courses. That it goes a long way with production value, because, when you're, same with sound, you always, I have a good sound background, just from high school, but lighting and sound is very, very important. So I would always make sure to have that in place if you can, because you can buy used equipment on eBay or Phil said earlier, Craigslist, just to get that base production value established. Yeah.
So part of this is what we're talking about is preparation, pre-production, pre-visualization, brainstorming before you get to the set, camera, lighting, blocking rehearsals, location walkarounds, because you can see it in sometimes, but if it's kind of like lining up a golf shot. If you're just looking at the pin, you're going to miss half a dozen things that are going to happen to your ball. So it really helps to do a whole 360 around the place. And you may even found a different place to shoot, to set up the camera, going, I didn't see that before. That's really interesting. And we sort of touched on this before, and I don't know if we've lost our friends yet or
I
not.
think we still have them. I think we just lost
Do we?
the iPad, yeah.
The advantage of perhaps starting out with a short film first. That seems to be pretty good advice for the last, certainly several years, and yet a lot of people want to jump into the feature right away. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it's always good to start with a short, kind of do the proof of concept, and then develop that into a bigger project, whether that be a series or a feature. That's what we're doing with my latest short film, The Toms. We're thinking about doing that making that into a series. So it's a lot easier. You can make mistakes, you can experiment, you can see what works, you can test the idea out, and then develop it further from there. A lot less resource. It costs a lot less money to make a short than a feature.
I wanted to talk about the idea of getting your movie out there once it's made. Touch a little bit on marketing opportunities, and whether or not it's useful to attend film festivals at all. Now, again, a lot of that's going to cost you more money, but I'm wondering what your feelings of that are, if you've got scraped up a few extra bucks.
I always budget for festival submissions when I'm trying to raise money for a project, because I think festivals are super important if you go to the right ones in terms of who you can meet. And then another big thing, a lot of festivals have cash prizes. So if you win at a festival, you can then use that money to enter more festivals, and maybe some have distribution packages and things like that. So, it's all about who you know, and you're going to meet people at film festivals if you're going to bigger ones. And local ones are great too, because you get involved with the local community, and different companies and sponsors there. You never know where your next gig's going to come from as a filmmaker. So I love film festivals. Gets you out of the office or the studio or wherever you're working.
I saw Stefan raise a hand.
No, I was just itching, but I definitely have my opinions. Yeah, no, film festivals are critically important in terms of the life of a movie if you've made a feature. But that said, there's different types of festivals. There's only a very small handful of festivals that actually matter in terms of getting distribution. There's only 4 or 5 of them that really matter in the United States. But festivals give you the opportunity to travel, because you do get to travel on a lot of festival dime, and you also get to meet people and have a good time and see how the audience reacts to your movie. But if you're looking for distribution, there's really, the festivals in Park City in January, Sundance and Slamdance, they count. Toronto, that counts. South by Southwest, that counts. And that's about it. The rest of the festivals in the United States might get you some great critical notice, which is also worth dollars, and it might get you audience. So, but in terms of, getting a distributor to look at the movie, there's very few festivals, and they're very, very hard to get into. Incredibly difficult to get into. So So yeah, I mean, I recommend that filmmakers try to get into them, but I also think that they also know the realities of how one gets into these festivals. And it's the movie has to have merit, but it needs to have a lot of other things. There have to be, friends, friends of the movie that know friends of the festival. Quite honestly,
Yep.
having name actors in a movie never hurts. Um, I will say probably the one festival that I would say is devoid of nepotism is Slam Dance. If you can get into Slam Dance, you've honestly gotten into a festival with, but I can't say the same about others. That's not a bad thing. I mean, that's just the way it is. And the reason people know each other is because they've earned their place in the movie business by having made movies and knowing people and this and that. So even though it sounds cynical, it's not. I mean, there's a reason that filmmakers make good films. They have experience. They've learned their mistakes by making shorts, and they've met people, and that's all part and parcel. If you do get into one of these festivals, then you want to spend money on a publicist, which is expensive. You do want to spend, it's part of the marketing, and you're going to be going to these festivals. And let me tell you, in Park City in January is unbelievably expensive. So yeah, you want to definitely budget probably $20,000-$30,000 for a festival run if you can. I mean, that's Strad Style got into Slam Dance, and that was actually why it became sort of ICM represented it. It got a very good deal, got a Hulu exclusive. We also dropped about $35,000 in Park City in 1 week alone, in terms of places to stay, flying people out, a publicist, all those kind of things, the party. It was very expensive, but it was worth it because that did help, get us our final deal. So those are realities to think about.
Yeah, I second everything Stefan said, and potentially bringing on like a sales agent to the film to represent it and to open the doors to those festivals if you don't have the connections yet. If we're talking about features, we made the mistake of thinking that all the festivals were merit based and not necessarily understanding the game that we have to learn to play. So we submitted to like all the big festivals and obviously didn't get into any of them because we didn't have any famous actors in it. We didn't have anybody on the inside that could kind of get us past the entry screeners. And as soon as we brought our sales agent on board, he like instantly called all the festival directors of the festivals that we hadn't screened at yet that were still big, and all of them loved the film but said it was too late in the process. They had already made their selections for that year. Next time send it directly to them. So that's when we learned that like, okay, we don't submit through Film Freeway. We should go right to the festival director through a producer or through a sales agent, because it's a lot harder to get in if you don't have somebody famous. And there's so many. I mean, me and Tom are involved in the Bucks Fever Film Fest, so we know how judging works. There's so many different opinions based off of an individual's life experience that you might have a really good film, but if that first person who's screening it doesn't like it or doesn't connect with it, it's not going to go past them. And that's why I think kind of the game of film festivals is so important to understand, because if you're able to build natural relationships with people who are on the inside, and I mean that like legitimately, like you have to legitimately build a relationship and not go to these festivals like looking to take advantage of people and like, oh, let me befriend them because they'll get me in. It doesn't work that way. It takes years of being friends and helping each other out on things to even get to a point where somebody could open some doors for you. So you have to be patient as well. But yeah, it's a whole game that I know we could probably have its own panel discussion on how to navigate the film festival circuit.
Indeed, you could. And even years ago, I mean, everybody's familiar with Sundance. Years ago, I heard Sundance is no longer Sundance. So there you go. Important question. What's the hardest and the best lesson that you learned over the years in filmmaking?
Get good actors.
I would say make sure, this is a really broad statement, but make sure everyone's on the same page before you go into production, in pre-production. Like I have an example, my latest short film, the DP and the colorist and I, we had a disagreement on what the color grading should look like. And that goes back to me as a director. I didn't establish a clear color palette or mood board before we went into production. So the DP shot it thinking he wanted it to make it a certain way with his vision. Even I thought I was on board with that, but we didn't actually look at images and have a mood board. So when we got to the colorist, I told the colorist what I wanted. He and the DP butted heads just because they were on two different wavelengths. So had I gotten everyone on the same page in pre-production, sat everybody down, it's like, okay, this is the vision I want. This is the color I want. I want it to look, blue and in this scheme and this color palette. Like, okay, we'll shoot for that, and then we'll create a lot actually to use on set to go into production with. So that's just one example, but I would say pre-production is super, super important. And just make sure you're having conversations about every aspect of production and post before you even start.
I'm trying to think what my biggest lesson has been. There's like every time you make a film, you learn a million new things. You learn a million ways not to make a film when you make a film, and then you apply that to the next one where you learn a million new ways. But I think most recently when I was doing my feature, next time I do a feature, I'm not going to read the IMDb comments or reviews or anything like that. I'm going to have somebody I trust curate the legitimate constructive criticism and not dwell in trolls. I guess it was a really weird thing to experience. When you publicly put a film out there, you get a lot of different opinions, and a lot of them are just people who are angry or think that they're being funny and want to, get some laughs. And that was something that I had to learn to not take seriously every comment because everybody has an opinion. And if you take everybody's opinion too seriously, you lose track of your own. And I think that's, really important not to lose your own creativity and your own self in your projects by trying to please everybody, because you'll never do that. It's actually a good sign that you're on the right track if some people get pissed off, because it means that you have a point of view that you're taking on things.
Yeah, critics suck. But I think in terms of production, the mistakes that I've made and the mistake I see continually being made by filmmakers, because we have great camera. Everybody's got access to a camera now that can generate an image that's as good as anything that you've seen on the screen. I mean, we're in a great place for that. Same with editing systems, finishing the film in terms of coloring, all that stuff. Yeah, you got to do that right. I mean, that's a basic. But where I see people always making mistakes, and I've made this mistake, are with actors. The biggest sign to me of a low-budget amateur film is poor acting. And you can go wrong with a lot of other things in your movie. You can have shoddy lighting. You should have good sound, but you can have less than stellar stuff all around. But if your actors are good, you probably can get away with a lot of it. If your actors aren't good, I don't care how glossy that movie is, it's going to look like amateur hour. That's the facts. And I learned that the hard way. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, you guys took me right into my my next question, and I think you've addressed it. But if you want to throw some more thoughts into it, I was going to ask you if there is any advice you could give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today, and we certainly did hear a lot of the responses that address that. Any other ideas or advice you might offer?
Not so much about breaking in. I think that's just going to come with time and just putting out work consistently. But one thing I've learned is that if you're the director, it's your project. Creatively, it's your vision. At the end of the day, there needs to be someone steering the ship. And it goes back to that thing I was talking about color with. I was talking to some other cinematographers, some other DPs, and I was asking them for advice. I was like, what do you think of this color grade? Is this DP wrong, or is he out of line? Like, what is he doing? He was like, Tom, it's your film. You're the director. It's your vision. You produced this too. Show me. I was going to send him 2 versions and ask him which one he liked better. He goes, send me the one version that you like, because that's the project that you're putting out. So that's going to come with just making work consistently and building confidence in yourself as an artist. So that's what I would recommend. Like, never forget that it's your project if it's your project.
That's good. Take ownership, because it takes a great deal of actual courage to put you on film. If you do it right, that's exactly what you're doing. If you're a good writer, that's exactly what you're doing. It's the most naked of professions out there. Now, we also know that there are many big budget films that have crashed and burned. And we know there are many examples of smaller films that have actually succeeded. And perhaps the difference was there were some filmmakers who said, I got this idea. I think we've got the money. This would be so cool. Let's do it. And they end up being broke and discouraged. And maybe losing a couple friends in the process, by the way, because they put their hope and trust in you as well. The others took a step back and they asked themselves some more questions. Even if we can do this, should we? What's it going to cost us in time and effort, money? How does it actually serve the story and move it forward? So let's follow the science. I'm going to quote Dr. Ian Malcolm, a man whose name may be familiar to you. He's a mathematician who specializes in chaos theory, who warned one of his employers, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. So budget, as certainly as important it is to many aspects of the film, also know that good films can't exist without the vision, inspiration, ingenuity that make them possible. So, the readiness is all. Let's give a thank to our panelists, Stefan Avalos, Phillip Carroll, and Thomas Verdi for sharing their experience and insights with us this afternoon. I think I kept it on time. And to our audience, let me thank you for your participation, because I think a good audience is a good participant, always. So in the meantime, embrace your limitations. Keep writing. Keep directing. Keep working. And to quote Sir Winston, never, never, never give up. Thank you.